All right, guys, so we're working on the Douglas 2-wire panels. You'll notice that some are older, like this panel right here. And they're all right, but they're not gorgeous, right? Some of the conductors have been moved around there. So we got one over here. Excuse the camera work. And we got a couple over here. So this one's a little cleaner. So it's another setup here where we have the relays here, and we've got our terminals for our lights here, and then your switches are going to be below. So again, nice, but still a little bit messy on the inside here. And then this one here for our third iteration is gorgeous. So it's got all the relays nicely placed in there with your terminal blocks. So all your relays, then you've got your lights with the terminals blocks that correspond to them, and then you got your switches over on the other side. I'm going to be working on the older panel, so let me move over there and I'll show you how to wire up the 2 out of the 3 projects. All right, guys, let's go through the wiring for the Douglas 2-wire. So here we're going to go through the 24 volts AC controls. So over here you've got your 120 volts, right? That's a separate light that controls for a separate contact for your lighting. All of this right here is 24 volts AC that ultimately controls your 120 volt lighting controls. So over here we've got 120 volts that goes into our step down transformer to 24 volts AC. And let's walk through this circuit. We've got the white conductor that goes over to the rocker switch. Now, this is an older style of rocker switch. There are newer ones where you press the button and you have LEDs that turn on. But let's walk through this one and go through the diodes as we see the current flowing from here over to the relay. So we've got current going through the white, and then when we hit the switch, it's going to go through one of the diodes, then come over here through the red conductor, and that goes through one of these diodes here, and then energizes the coil, and then that relay is going to latch into the opposite position. So in that case, the contact would come down, close the contact for our 120 volts, and then this contact right here would move up to the opposite position there. Okay, so once that is in the opposite position, when we press the rocker switch again in the other direction, right, then the current's going to come over here through the other diode here, again through the red conductor, okay, then going through this diode right here, through this contact that would be then in this position, moving the coil and latching it into the opposite direction. So, and that would obviously open the contacts there. So through the use of diodes, they're able to control the direction of the AC current and thereby energize the coil, and then the coil will latch in one direction or another. Okay, so they're spelled out down here in the directions that we just went through, right? So the white conductor, this is the switching on, right? So current goes through the white conductor, right? Through this diode right here, through this diode, right? Activating the relay, right? Then the relay changes state, right? And closes the contact. And in doing so, this will move up to the opposing position. So now we're into this one right here, right? So this is the switched on position. Okay, so at that point, the rocker has made contact here, energized this relay through the use of 2 diodes there, and then this will latch into place. And will stay in that position until another signal comes through to change the state of the relay. So it's a latching relay. Okay, so in this case, we've latched in the on position. Okay, then if we wanted to switch it to the off position, then we obviously hit the rocker switch in the opposing direction. Current then goes in the opposing direction from the blue wire over to the relay, right? Through the contact here, through the opposing diode here, through the diode on the switch, and then back to our 24 volts AC supply. And again, that's going to move the contact up, open up the contact, and then latch it in the open position. Okay, so these are the older rocker switches, and then you've got other ones where they have LEDs that show the status of the contactor. Okay, so the LEDs that are here, if it's like whatever the color is of the LED, that's going to be like the next time you press that push button, what it's going to do. So if it has a red LED, that means the next time you press that push button, you will turn off the light. If it has a green LED being shown, then the next time you press that push button, you'll be turning on the light there. So it's through the use of diodes it allows the current to go through this coil right here and then latches in either the on or the off position there. Okay, so we've got a number of different circuits that we're going to wire up. There is a relay scanner as well. So in addition to the standard switches that we have and the relays, you can also get a relay scanner with these units. And by doing this, you can control, in this case, all 24 relays. So you can either have them turn on or turn off with a photocell, right? Or you can have a local switch that is like a master control switch that turns everything on and everything off. So you can have local control with your switches, and you can have multiple switches controlling those lights. And then you can also have a master control relay that controls like a whole floor or whole bank of lights. Okay, so let's go through our first project here. See if we can get all this on the page. And we're going to walk through the wiring of this guy. Okay, so first of all, we're going to have the main supply here going to our step-down transformer. So that's already done for you, right? So we have line 1 and neutral. This is our 120 volt supply. Okay, going into the H1 and H2 of our step-down transformer. And then on the other side, we're going to have 24 volts AC on this side. Okay, if we go through the wiring of our 120 volts, right? So that would be our line and our neutral. I guess I could make this in like a blue or something. Okay, we're going to, well, let's walk through the 120 volts that goes over to this contact right here. So I'm just going to draw a line up and over, and we'll just make this separate from our 24 volts AC. So we've got our 120 volts being fed over to one side of the contacts. Okay, and in this case, it says complete the following diagram. So the switch will control the relay and one light there. Okay, so we need to have one light being fed from this relay. Okay, and then on the other side, then we would have the neutral connected up to the other side of that light. Okay, so that would be our 120 volts. If we wanted to, like it's not asking for this, but if we wanted to do 2 lights, then we would parallel this feed, right? And then our neutral would also be fed on the other side, right? So then we would have these two tied together. And then we'd have our neutral going back there. Okay, so that provides us with our 120 coming from this contact right here. Again, this one's just asking for the control of one relay and one light, right? So I'm not sure why on this diagram we have the 2 lights available, but let's get rid of that guy. And so we would just have the neutral going back to the other side of the light. Okay, now let's go through the 24 volts AC wiring here. Okay, so we've got one conductor here. We've got, let's just do maybe this in black. Okay, so this is our feed here going to the white conductor. Obviously I can't show a white on a white background there, so I'm going to do that one as a black. Okay, so we're going to feed from X1 over to the white of our switch. Okay, and then from the red, we're going to tie red to red. So the red on the switch is going to go over to the red on the relay here. Okay, and then the blue on the relay is going to go back to our 24 volt power supply. Okay, and so over here we have our 20, you can't see that with my pen. Over here we have our 24 volts AC wiring, and then separate from that we have our 120 volt lighting going to the light there. Okay, so if we follow this current, we're going to have the current from X1 going through the white conductor through one of the diodes here through our switch over to our relay coil. Obviously, this has a diode that's integral to the unit that's not being shown. Then we're going to energize that coil. The iron of this plunger here will be pulled in, right, which will close that contact there. And then we have the blue bringing our return back to the X2. At that point, then once the current goes through this coil, then this plunger right here will be pulled in. This contact will close and will remain closed, and that will provide us with our 120 to our light. Okay. Then if we hit the switch in the opposite position, then we've got current coming over here, right, through this diode, through this guy, over again through the coil in the opposite direction, right? So I guess it would be going through X2 and then through here and then back this way, right? And then that's going to energize the coil, which is going to push this plunger out, which will open that contact, which will break our 120 volts to our light. All right, guys, so first project is one switch, one relay, and two lights. Let's go through the components here. So first of all, everything's fed from that receptacle at the top there, right? You're going to turn your power on here. Okay, keep in mind that as you're wiring stuff up, you will most likely want to turn that off and lock it off on yourself. That power goes into the panel. So the 120 comes in here, right? So you'll notice that I've turned it off before I throw my hands in here. So the 120 comes into here. So we got line and neutral and our ground connections. That goes over to our control transformer. And then we've got 24 volts AC going over to the other side over here. And that goes to our X1 and X2 terminals on these terminal blocks here. You'll notice that I've jumpered out the X1 and X2 terminals on this side, so I've got a number of places where I can grab them. You'll also notice that some of the terminal blocks have been stripped over time by students, so if there's an issue with one of those terminal blocks or the terminal blocks for the switch, then tell me and we'll replace them out. Okay, so we've got our 120 volts on this side, and we've got our 24 volts on this side. Okay, never the two shall meet. Okay, be careful on this side because you have live 120 volt terminals, right? So anytime that you're in there, you're going to be wearing your safety glasses the entire time that you're on the station. Anytime that you're working anything live, you're going to grab the gloves if you're doing any meter readings or anything like that. Okay, so the first one is, let me turn this guy on. Okay, so first one is one switch. So you'll see that at the moment I have a green terminal, right? So that's denoting that the next time that I press that push button, that it's going to turn on my lights over here. So if I hit that push button, then it turns on both lights, right? So that should be one relay that is controlling two lamps there, right? So let's see if I can get everything in there. So as I hit that switch, then it turns on the two lights, and you'll see that the LED turns to like the LED on the switch is denoting what the next time you press that push button, it will do to the lights, right? So it's saying that the next time you press the button, that you will turn off those lamps, right? So by toggling that, we should be controlling one relay up here. So you'll notice that that guy just clicks back and forth there. Okay? Be careful when doing this, but you can take a slot screwdriver, right? So last thing you want to be doing is throwing the screwdriver into the live terminals, but you can test out the relay. Can I get that in at the same time? So by changing or toggling that relay, you can then change the state of the contacts there, right? So you can manually trip those contacts, right? So I'm just taking my screwdriver and then gently changing the state of that latching relay there. Okay, so that's our first one in that we have one switch controlling one relay, and that one relay is controlling two lamps. Okay, let's go through the second project here. So again, we can start off with our wiring on our 120 volt side, right? So we've got our line going to one side of our control transformer. Then I think we had the neutral as a blue, right? So we could bring this guy over here. Looks good. It says complete the following diagram so the switch will control both relays with one light per relay. Okay, so let's go with a black here as our feed. So I'm just going to bring the line 1 over here again, and we're just going to bypass everything, and we're going to feed one side of each of these relays. Right, so we'll feed that side, and we'll also feed this side of our relays. Okay, and then it says that so the switch will control both relays with one light per relay. So this would be like trying to show like a bank of lights connected up to each relay. Obviously we just have the one, but think of like 10 or 12 different lights connected up to each of these relays here. So I'm going to feed the first light from the first relay. Okay, and then from this guy we'll come up and we'll feed our second light from the second relay. So second bank of light from the second relay. Okay, and then obviously we got our neutral as our return. So these guys will have our neutral, and then we'll tie back into our feed there. Okay, so that's our 120 volts there. Again, completely separate from the 24 volts AC. Okay, for our 24 volts AC, then we have our X1 going down to our light. Okay, so over to the white tab of our rocker switch there. Then our next one is we're going to go from red to red. Okay, and this switch is going to control both relays, right? So I've got to bring this over to one red terminal on the first relay, and I got to have a parallel feed to the other red on the second relay. Okay, and then they both need a return, and so we've got our blue conductors here, and so those guys will tie together, and they're going to go back to X2 of our power supply. Beautiful. So again, this part right here is our 24 volts AC. Okay, going to our rocker switch, from the rocker switch over to a parallel feed to both of the relays, and the relays are having this common return back to X2 on our control transformer. Okay, so by pressing this rocker switch, the current will go through the white, right, and then through this diode over here, parallel feed into both of the relays, right? Both relays will be energized. This iron plunger will be pulled in on both of them, which will latch it into the on position, closing both of these contacts. And since both of these contacts are closed, then we've got 120 volts going to one bank of lights and 120 volts going to the other bank of lights with a shared common neutral back to our supply there. Okay, next one is we have one switch controlling two relays which control two banks of lights. So we've separated the two separate loads, like we have too much on one relay, right? Too much amperage on for one relay. So we're going to separate the two separate lighting loads into two separate relays. So that's this switch right here. Again, it's showing green, so the next time I hit this, it will turn on the lamps. So I'm turning on these two right here. Okay, so I got one switch controlling two relays, and each of those lights there is denoting like two banks of lights, right? So I should have two relays toggling here in my panel. So you can see that both of those relays are toggling together as I hit the switch. And let's see if I don't know if I can get this in here, but I'll show you what I'm doing. So I'm toggling this gently, right, by adjusting that terminal right there. Okay, and that should be able to control each individual lamp there, right? So that controls one lamp, and then this controls the other bank of lights below, right? So each separate relay controls a separate bank of lights there. But both of those relays are paralleled to this single switch. So this single switch controls both relays, which control both banks of lights. Okay, so now that we've gone through the standard wiring on the previous two projects, I'm going to leave this one for you guys to figure out. So this one says complete the following diagram so both switches control the relay and both lights. So in this case, we have, again, our feed to our control transformer, right? We're going to bring our line one over to our relay contacts. From the relay contact, it looks like we're going to feed both lights here, and then with our shared common return to the neutral. And then remember that we usually have X1 to the white conductors, right? Both of these guys are going to control this one relay. And so you would think that you would have your whites tied together, your reds in parallel, and then the reds would feed into this contact right here with blue as your return back to the X2. Okay, so last one is we have two switches in parallel feeding one relay, and that one relay feeds two lights there. So we've got two switches. The two switches are in parallel, so you can see that these two switches, as I hit the switch, the two indicator buttons are identical, right? So they both turn green or they both turn red there. Okay, those are controlling one single relay. So that single relay is right there. You can see that bad boy moving. Okay, so either switch controls the relay, and then that relay is then controlling two separate lights down here. So as I hit the switch, then that I'm hitting or turning on both of those lamps there. Okay, you'll notice that in my wiring here, I have brought the feeds down to these terminals. So I brought the separate hots there. My neutral is coming up, and you'll notice that in the pipe, I've got a hot and a neutral in the pipe, right? So last thing we want to see is a single hot without the accompanying neutral there. I have brought that neutral and tied into the other neutrals here, but out in the field, we know that we'd bring separate neutrals back to the panel. I've only brought it to this terminal right here because if we take a look at the panel, there's only one terminal there for the neutral there. But again, out in the field, you would have separate neutrals going back to the panel there. You'll notice that in certain boxes, there will be a bonding terminal. So there you can see the bonding terminal there. That's because we have the Coreflex being used there. Anytime that we're using the EMT, then the EMT will not have a bond because the EMT is acting as a bond itself. Okay, so main thing I want you to be careful on these projects, guys, is to make sure that you have the loads connected there, right? So make sure that you actually have the light connected as the load. The main thing that students do on these projects is they neglect to put, let me turn this off before I put my hands in there. They neglect to put the load, and then they end up shorting out line and neutral on the actual contacts of the relay there. So please ensure that you've brought the neutral back to the appropriate terminal, that you have brought your line conductor to the hot, and you brought the neutral to the appropriate terminal here. Okay, don't get those backwards. Make sure you have a hot and a neutral within the pipe. Don't want to see one single hot in there without the accompanying neutral. And make sure you put the load into the circuit there. All right, guys. So I've given you two diagrams. You guys have to do the third diagram for the one that we just saw with the parallel feeds there, right? So again, last project that you guys are going to have to do on your own, based on the diagrams that we've done, is the parallel switches here, right, that are controlling one relay, and that one relay is then controlling two separate lighting loads. All right, guys, thanks, good luck.